Hey, this is Jason Aaron, writer of Southern Bastards and Uncle Scrooge and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you're listening to Splash Pages.
Hi,
Hey, how's it going?
doing well. Nice to have you here. I'm Carrie with Splash Pages. We're at Terrificon right now, and we're interviewing Jason Aaron. If my voice will hold out, how
It
have you
is
been enjoying the
Saturday.
con?
It is.
What?
I mean, it's Saturday, so we're all a little hoarse. It is Saturday, right? Isn't it
Yeah,
today?
I think
Okay. All right.
Saturday.
Yes,
Pretty sure. I'm not exactly
I
sure.
know.
I'm with
I've
you.
been to a lot of cons lately, so
Well, I want to start off first, and this is going to be kind of a weird question,
okay. I love weird
but
questions.
okay. So with your weird world building, you'll start off with like you tend to do, and I'm going to go with like the mini series.
Yeah.
You have more than one artist that does each arc of what you're doing with the story arc, and the flavor of them that you bring in, and with each different artist, the way that you write is very different for each of those as
Oh
well.
yeah.
And so, well, I'm going with like Once Upon a Time at the End of the World,
Right.
The Goddamned and stuff.
Right.
You seem to have this way of going. I think of it as like a Bosch triptych is almost like what we're getting into. Only every panel, like the first one is Van Gogh's version of it, and you're like laying out these
Nice.
strokes
Yeah, I
of
like that
world
analogy.
building, and then you go over and we have Klimt. In the center, the world's kind of spread out, but the characters are coming in real crisp and dark.
Right.
And the last one, you're like, Goya, this is the way everything ends, and all the darkness. So, what do you have to say about how your process is with writing and how you change everything like that
Yeah, well,
between arcs?
I mean, in particular, I guess you're talking mostly about Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, right? Like the book I just did
Yeah, yeah,
for
that, and
Boom.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I feel like really I write the same no matter who I'm writing for, in terms of like how I script and I'm always just trying to give whoever that artist is what they need, and then kind of get out of their way. So I don't really change that part of it. I mean, with that story wise, so that book in particular, yeah, each volume of that is a very different. They're all the same story. It's the same characters on one journey, but very very different in terms of kind of tone, and it's two characters who fall in love, and then we follow them at different points in their life as their relationship kind of blossoms and then starts to wither and falls apart. So it's a story of love and divorce and how do you move on from ruin. So like a life or like a love story, there are very different acts to that, right? Like falling in love with someone is a very different story than when you've been together for a long time, then when that breaks and falls apart, and what does that look like in the midst of that breaking, and afterwards. Like those are very very different kinds of stories, so I wanted to do all of that as one. And what is like a very cute love story, what's a story of this adult couple in love and trying to preserve and rebuild society and the ruins of the wasteland. And then what does it look like when they have to come together, at the end of time and put aside their differences to try to save the world? Um, so yeah, that's one story with three very very different volumes. And the cool part, I mean, one I got to work with three amazing artists, and Alexander Tefenkgi did the first part, and Leila Del Duca did the second, and then Nick Dragotta did the third. And then by the time we get to that third volume, all three of those timelines and those art teams like weave together, which I did some of that sort of thing on the last Punisher book I did with two artists. So I like the idea of like, let's take it up a notch and do three. I mean, it's very complicated. Certainly more of a challenge for my editors, and they have to coordinate all that. But all three art teams were amazing. Everybody like loved what the other teams were doing. So it's cool. Punisher was the same way. Like it starts to kind of feed into itself, and that one art team's like looking at what the other folks are doing is like, oh, like they're really up in the bar. Like we got to, it kind of helps everybody
Yeah.
feel really excited and in a different sort of way. So I don't know how many other projects I will ever do that are like that. But it worked perfectly for that kind of story.
It also, and it was a bit longer and more authors even, your Incredible Hulk run.
The which one?
Incredible Hulk.
Oh yeah.
This, first of all, with the separation thing, this is totally just a thing I had to tell you because it came up in my head as I was reading through it again.
Sure.
When Bruce is just like, you don't have the right to ask me that, you know, and the thing I'm just like, Separate Lives by Phil Collins is going through my head. I'm just like, weird. But
I mean, I clearly have a thing about characters interacting with themselves in weird ways. You know, with Thor, I did so much of that, of just different versions of Thor. You know, young Thor, old Thor, present day Thor, all hanging out and not getting along, right? Arguing with each other. I think what I did on Hulk is kind of another version of that. And I was just trying to do a different dynamic with that Hulk Bruce Banner relationship. You know, part of it was showing like Banner as the scary one.
yeah,
He's the one you got to watch out for.
that is the most brutal Bruce Banner I've ever seen.
Thanks.
I was just like, oh, wow. This is what happens when you lose half of yourself.
Right. So there was an arc of that called Stay Angry, which was basically like Hulk had to do whatever he could to stay as the Hulk, which we jumped around and did a lot of single issue stories and with different art teams. Like I think another thing I think you've seen me do a lot. I like single issue stories. You know, I like being able to give people an issue of a comic that feels like something substantial, you know, instead of just like one chapter of a six issue story. Like each issue should feel like a thing in and of itself that's worth you plopping down, you know, $4 or $5, however much it is.
Oh, you're definitely worth the money with the reading because
cheers. Thank you.
You used to write a very incredible story. Wanted to ask, I was going to bring up something, we'll cover this kind of quick. You are somebody that writes about faith a lot, which is hard to do in a good way that doesn't cause problems. But how does that affect? Well, how do you?
Sorry,
I mean,
Deadpool's yelling at us.
You had the Wolverine. That's how you got into comics, wasn't it? You wrote a Wolverine story about
talent search contest. Yeah, it was a story. Yeah, a story about faith. It was like, I won a Marvel talent search contest in 2001, 2002. So just typed up, you know, like a synopsis for a 10-page Wolverine story. And mine was very much influenced by Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. And that it's a story where Wolverine kind of encounters this woman in the woods who's got a flat tire, and he's talking to her while trying to clearly like get her out of there. Mm-hmm. And it's really just about the conversation that they have, and it's part of it's about fate. And then I think, you know, again, I wrote that as having never written a comic before. That was the first thing I ever had published. But so certainly when I wrote that, I had no grand plan. I had no idea if I would ever write any other comics. But I still think that issue, that idea of like Wolverine thoughts on fate, I explored for like 7 years after that. Once I started doing Marvel stuff, you know, in Wolverine solo books, I think in Amazing X-Men and Wolverine and the X-Men, like him wrestling with that idea, you know, like when Nightcrawler died and then I brought Nightcrawler back to life, like those are big parts of it too. So I loved exploring that idea. Then I sent Wolverine to hell at one point, right? So yeah, and I think you know, like that, those ideas, of course, influenced my run on Thor in a huge way. And I mean, I've talked about how I grew up in the South, grew up in a small town, grew up very religious. Then kind of my faith sort of fell apart when I was in college, like it does for a lot of people. And I've been an atheist, you know, for most of my life at this point. But still fascinated by faith and stories of religion. And, you know, I've done a book called The Goddamned, which is like,
that's where
I'm skipping ahead. So clearly, even though I don't have the faith part of it, I'm still fascinated by a lot of things there. And yeah, I continue to explore that in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, I love that. It's, like I said, it's not done well often, but you do it really well. And with The Goddamned, like we were going to just hit on, first of all, Is any of the story with Kane? Have you seen the movie He Never Died
No.
with Henry Rollins? He plays a Kane
Oh,
that
Henry
is,
Rollins does?
yeah.
Oh,
It's
no, I
it's an
need to
older
look this
movie,
up.
but it's a similar concept of only it's in modern day. Kane is still walking the earth, and he's just
Sure.
like,
Huh. No, I need to see
and
that.
he shows up. A kid
I mean,
shows up.
Henry Rollins is a great casting choice. That's
Oh,
awesome.
fabulous! But you wrote a Kane, and trying to die, walking around, and it was really interesting that you took Kane and then you set him in Noah's time because and the way that the tribalism and the technology and everything worked, I don't think a lot of people think there's like, okay, Garden of Eden and then civilization.
Right.
But it's like, no, there were all these scattered tribes of people.
Sure.
And so, how much of that did you like have planned? Or was there a reason that you went exactly to Noah's time since that was an ending point for a lot of things? Or
I mean, some of it is just establishing like um, that this is like the pre-flood world. You know, I mean, to me, the idea was always to like explore. I mean, it's I was fascinated by that story, right? Like the again, speaking of it purely from a story standpoint, like God creates man, man very quickly goes to shit in such a way that God's like, well, that was a mistake. Let's kill everybody and start over. So I was always fascinated by that pre-flood world and wanted to do stories set in that. So some of us just sort of draw the line. You know, we see it start to rain at the end of the first volume of the Goddamn. So just sort of establishing this is the world that we're going to explore. The idea, of course, I've done 2 volumes with R.M. Guerra, and we'll definitely do more. And some of it will be again different stories set in that pre-flood world. Others will be exploring like what happens as we progress forward with the flood.
so we've had the Virgin Brides came out with the Niflheim,
Right.
and there's more going to be coming after still.
Yes, yeah, that's always been the plan to do more. I
Okay.
mean, again, like the Virgin Bride sort of connects to the first volume just at the very end.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's a completely separate story, different characters, different place within that same world. So part of it's I want to do that. I want to do more stories just set in that time. They will build, and there will be an overarching. It's headed somewhere in particular,
Okay.
but they don't all connect together in massive ways.
And the one thing I kind of wanted to focus on that was that with the Virgin Brides, they're set in a very isolated community.
Right.
It's the girls are all hunted basically. You find out and raised by nuns of a sort who
Right.
then as soon as you bleed, you go up and you are given to an angel, and everybody thinks it's exciting. And some of the girls find out and they're just like, "Oh no,
It's not so great."
But one of the burdens of the brides beyond uh, giving birth to a Nephilim was then having to help raise them.
Right.
And they kept them kind of just caged up and, threw things out. Uh, what do you think the Nephilim would have been like if they weren't? Because it seemed like they were trapping them away from the rest of the world. Were they keeping the Nephilim from being out in the world, or were they trapped
I don't
in
know
there?
that's what some of us. They're just trying to raise them. They're like they're monstrous babies, basically. Like they're sort of things that shouldn't exist. Sort of these unnatural creatures. So I don't know. Is it all nature? Is it all nurture? I don't know. It's like a little bit of both.
Yeah, I
Terms
wasn't
of
sure
why
which
they
was trapping which. If the
right.
Nephilim were keeping the women there, or if the women were keeping the Nephilim there.
Sure. I mean, on the one hand, they're like poor, unfortunate creatures that never asked to be born. But on the other hand, they all seem to kind of turn into monsters for the most part of what we see. So I don't know. It's a good question though. Maybe that's something we'll answer as we go forward.
Awesome. I would love to see that. And my final question for you is, what is the secret handshake for the Horror Comic Writers Super Secret Tiki Club?
I can't tell you the secret handshake.
If I write you a volume, would you?
If you what?
If I write something, would you?
Sure, maybe then.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, I totally wanted to write a comic just to get the handshake.
Oh yeah.
But
Well, my love of tiki goes very, very deep. It's which is also because of comics, and that James Simon, the owner of the Isotope, great comic book shop in San Francisco. James was the first guy to take me to a tiki bar. He took me to Smuggler's Cove, which is a legendary tiki bar in San Francisco.
Okay.
Still probably my favorite tiki bar, best painkiller I've ever had, Smuggler's Cove. So James very much turned me on to that tiki culture. I've always been kitschy and love of things that are kitschy and nostalgic. I love Disney World, love Disney theme parks, so it's kind of tailor made for tiki. Also love rum.
Oh, well, that's a plus.
And then I wrote what was basically a tiki bar into Doctor Strange, the bar with no doors, which is only magicians can find their way there, and which was very much based on like my love of Smuggler's Cove. And now I literally everywhere I go to tiki bars. Like I've been to tiki bars in Prague and England and
Wow.
Greece, and just every time I'm somewhere for a comic convention, I'm looking like, okay, where's the closest tiki bar?
And that's what brought you back to EC too, wasn't it? Was it Erica?
To where?
To EC Comics, the new.
It was Sierra Hahn.
Sierra, okay.
Yeah, who's the editor in chief at Oni.
Like snuck you into a tiki bar to convince you to.
She did. Yeah, she took me to Tiki Tea, one of the tiki bars in Los Angeles. I get them confused. It was really good. But yeah, she knew the way to my heart. She took me out, bought me some tiki drinks, took me for like some street tacos, and by the end of it, I had agreed to write for EC. It's not like I took a lot of coaxing. I love Sierra. I've known Sierra a long time. She's one of my favorite people in comics. She's the reason I did Once Upon a Time at the End of the World at Boom when she was at Boom. And so yeah, she's one. I mean, you learn over the course of your career. Like it's cool to have favorite characters and to be like, I really want to write Batman or I want to write Spider-Man. That's great, and I think it's good to do work fueled by a passion that you had when you were a kid. But more important than the fictional characters are like the real people who are involved. And so the editors I've met, who I connect with, who I become friends with, who I love working with, I build that relationship with. I'll follow them wherever they go. It's like, okay, now you're editing Superman. Maybe next year you're editing, I don't know, Hot Wheels comics. Like, okay, whatever. I'll figure out a Hot Wheels pitch for you. So Sierra's somebody I'd follow anywhere. And yeah, and that said, even that aside, like the chance to do a new story for EC Comics is pretty wild opportunity that I never would have imagined, I would have had the chance to do.
Yeah, them coming back, that's just huge.
Right.
And you got a great lineup going on with everybody on that setup. So
yeah, some super cool. I mean, Sierra's got a great Rolodex, so she's got great names to call up.
All right. Well, was there anything else that you'd like to bring up?
Right now I got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which just started coming out from IDW, so that'll all be on that for the foreseeable future. I got Absolute Superman starting in November from DC, so I'm super excited about that one. Namor just started from Marvel. I think one issue is out of that. Issue 2 is maybe about to come out next week. What else? I just had Uncle Scrooge just came out like a month ago. A Berserker one shot, like a Western for Boom. I'll be at New York ComicCon in October, where I'll be announcing a new creator-owned book that'll be coming out early next year.
Nice.
That I'm really, really excited about. Something I've been working on a long, long time. And we'll also have, if you're at New York Comic-Con, you want to track me down, because we'll also have some special limited edition preview ash cans available of the new book.
I might have to
send at New York Comic-Con.
I might have to send somebody, but you guys make sure you get there.
Find me before they're gone.
All right.
So is that all? I think that's all. Maybe there's something else.
I know you were writing like 6 books at once or something like that.
It's been a great busy year.
Yeah, we get so much from you.
I know. I'm just spreading myself all through comics.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to an interview
Sure.
with us.
Thanks for having me.
And it's been great having you here and meeting you at the con.
Cool.
You're just a doll.